Pleasure to turn the meeting now over to Melissa.
Thanks, love. Melissa, alcoholic. I don't like all the attention like I used to before I was drinking. I wanted to thank Victor for inviting me out here. I know you know a lot of drunks, so that your heart thought of me, I'm honored. I want to thank all the helping hands that helped put this convention on, because I know it takes a lot of people. I want to thank you for being my host. And the boys, they're brothers, and they put on ties this morning, so thank you. Melissa, alcoholic. My sobriety date is January 10th, 2009. My home group is the Principles Group. We meet Mondays and Wednesdays at 5:45 in Chesterfield, Virginia. So if you're ever in the area, please come. I am sponsored. I know my grand sponsor and my great-grand sponsor, and I have the honor and privilege to sponsor other women. And I get to do a lot of cool things in Alcoholics Anonymous. We all do. We just take turns. One of the coolest things that I've got to do in Alcoholics Anonymous is go out to the Juvenile Detention Center. And I'll tell a little story real fast. We were shut down a little bit when we had COVID, and then they had recently opened back up. And so there was just like a small group of us that were cleared. And so the first time back, I was trying to find someone to come out there with me. And the person that ended up going was our alternate delegate. So it was like me and him. One cool thing that I knew he was our alternate delegate, right? And that, like, he came out there to meet me so we could go out there and talk to the kids. I just love Alcoholics Anonymous. What is it? The highest we get is sober. But when we went out there, we were filling out paperwork, and the guy, he told me, he was like, well, I'm not going to lie to you, it's a rough bunch of girls in there, and, they really don't even want you to come. And so I'm already getting scared when I speak anywho, and I always pray, talk to God before I do anything in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I was like, oh, okay. Well, thank you for giving me the heads up. But here's the power of Alcoholics Anonymous. Like, when I went in there and talked to the girls, of course they were judging me. When I was in juvie, I was judging people all the time. That's all I knew to do was judge. And I knew they were judging me when I was walking in, like, this girl, she don't know nothing about nothing. But the language of the heart that we get to speak to each other, like when I sat down, they were listening. They were asking questions about Alcoholics Anonymous. And when I left there, even the female guard that walked me out, and she was just kind of shaking her head. She's like, and they didn't even want to see you, But I thank God it wasn't like me, but I was like, thank you, God, because I don't know if I'll ever have another opportunity like that again. But I was like, but they did. They listened, and who knows how you plant a seed, because we're all affected by this somehow, some way. And I want to be sure to talk about the relationship that I have with my higher power, right? That's so funny too. It's on page 29 in our big book, how we were, establish a personal relationship with our Creator. That's the solution. And even I love that we repeat things in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm a slow learner, did a lot of brain damage, but I like that we repeat things. It's intuitively, I knew when I first came into the rooms, when I would hear people share from behind the podium, I wanted to learn about their higher power, whatever that was. I wanted to learn how they got closer to that power. But it says right there in the book, it's okay. Page 29. If you ever get asked to speak, I like to read that. But I'm going to share what it used to be like, what happened, and what it's like today. For today, it has a happy ending, so hopefully that's what ends up coming out. And so what it used to be like, all right. I grew up in an alcoholic home. I'm just going to talk about the little pack that I was born in with and kind of move on. So I'm the oldest of three. My dad was an alcoholic. He ended up being a wet brain. He spent the last years of his life in a nursing home. alcohol tormented him. You know, I remember one time he was having DTs and he thought that I was a vampire, and he had took the coffee table and he had thrown it through the front window. And I remember, like, I was scared, but I could see how scared he was, you know. But yeah, like, I always feel sad in that part in our big book, more about alcoholism, when it talks about, like, we are like men who have lost our legs who never grow new ones. So, like, towards the end, you know, I mean, he was a wet brain in a nursing home, and then he got a leg cut off, and then, like, a couple days later, he got his other leg cut off, and then he died. So, like, every time, you know, I always think about that. But here's the cool thing, like, spiritual awakenings, miracles, like seeing the good. I remember I was in my home group a couple of weeks ago, and my sponsor that I have now in Virginia, she was sitting next to me, and she knows my story. And when they were reading that, you know, I started to feel sad. I didn't outwardly say anything, but she had put her hand on my leg, and she had said, "I love you." And then I had that shift, right? A spiritual awakening, a shift. Like, I was feeling fearful, and then it got changed over to love, and so I love that. My mom, man, we had a lot of fun together. So my mom, she died of kidney failure. You know, she was an addict. I had my first drink with my mom. I had my first, like, almost everything with my mom. Like, we were just besties. We shared everything with each other. Our relationship was really toxic, but I love her. I miss her, you know. Oh man, we were always stealing things, you know, we were always taking turns, like going, like we'd be in like the emergency room, like it would be like either one of us, and everyone's like, "What did you take? What did you do?" And then the other person who wasn't in the bed would be like, you know, like not wanting to tell, not wanting to get in trouble, but it's like you want to help. But I love her, I miss her. I remember she would be so sneaky, she was so cute, guys were always falling in love with her. But she would, like, whenever we would go to the Goodwill, or every time I go to a Goodwill, I think about my mama, but she would be like, she'd have her little highlighters in her pocketbook, you know, because, like, if you go certain days, they'll have little slashes, like pink, yellow, you know, green, and so whatever, like, was the highest sale, you know, and she'd just think she was so cute, you know, she'd get all the things that, you know, we wanted, and, you know, mark it with the most off, but I miss her, and like I said, I'm the oldest. My little sister, she OD'd a couple years ago, so, and the sad thing about that is that she left two little girls. One just turned 19 and one just turned 11, and they were younger, obviously, when it happened. But here's the cool thing about Alcoholics Anonymous, right? Like, I get to show up, right? I get to plan adventures with them. I get to, every time I talk to them or on the phone or meet with them, and, you know, the last thing I always say is I say, God loves you, your mama loves you, and I love you, every time. Like, the little one kind of rolls her eyes because that's the age that she's at now. But I just want them to know, and that's the cool thing about AA is, like, when my sister died, it isn't like, oh, I feel sad, but it's like, what can I do? And then consistently do it, you know what I mean? So I can be there. And so then I have my little brother. The good news is he's currently in an Oxford house. But like, what was it, 6 or 7 months ago, he was in an alcohol-related incident, and he was like beaten so bad. Like, his eye, he'll never be able to see out of his left eye again. Like, his orbital globe is like shattered. And it's so crazy, like, you can be on this journey and like let things go, give it to God, write it out, which a lot of times, like, I mean, it works, but like, you know, when you haven't really completely surrendered it, because like when you wake up, it's like the first obsessive thing that you're thinking about, so it's like, but I don't know, I've been praying for God to send him a stranger, you know, to help him. I try to talk recovery to him, but he just gets angry. But I'm grateful he's in an Oxford house. He has a safe place to stay today, so I'm grateful for that. All right, I'm not going to talk a lot about, like, the childhood. You know, I grew up in an alcoholic home, so there was a lot of trauma, a lot of chaos, a lot of abuse. The police were always showing up. But to talk about my Creator, this relationship that I have, one thing that stands out, we never went to church, so like I can say I was a heathen for sure till I came into AA. But I remember as a kid, thank you, kindness, acts of kindness, right? That's what we get here. Like I remember I would be the oldest, I learned like peace at any price, don't rock the boat, just trying to keep things calm. My sister would always run across the road and, call the police. But I would grab my little brother, because at the time he was little, like, around 4 before our family got split up. And I would comfort him, and I would sing that song that like, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Even though like I didn't know anything about love or safety, but I knew somehow intuitively that it was connected to light, and I learned that in AA. So anywho, we all got split up as a family because that's what happens. So my brother went to live with a grandpa, my sister went to live with an aunt. I tried to stay with my mom for a little while, but what was happening is she wasn't coming home. So I got placed on child in need of supervision. But then, like I said, I was partying with my mom, I was partying with people that I were meeting, and so when I got I got a ton of minor in possession, minor in the influence, interference with the police officer tickets, like a lot. But when I got my very, very first one, my child in need of supervision got switched over to juvenile probation. So then I had a PO, right? And then so I got taken out of the house and I got put in a group home. But anytime I was picked up impaired, I had to go to juvie. I couldn't go back to the home because it wasn't safe for everybody, But I've always been stubborn. Like, you can ask my husband. I still have it deep down inside. But I remember, like, when I first got put in the group home, like, we would have chores and stuff, and I would sing that song, it's a hard knock life. For us, it's a hard knock life. And even as I get older, I don't know if I'll tell this story, but I was in a halfway house and I had chores again. It's like a cycle. You keep repeating it. Then I had chores in the halfway house and I'll be like, it's a hard knock life. Here I am, like, as an adult. But so when I was in the halfway house, the group home, I had a probation officer. I didn't like her. She didn't like me. I had a bad attitude. You wouldn't even recognize me. Like, I had my hair shaved, like just a little bit of hair like on top. I never buttoned my shirt. Like, I'd have baggy pants, had a little sports bra, and I would just button this one button. And I remember I wish I could make amends to one of the ladies that was working there, because I never would like button my shirt. I would just have like a little bit, and so she would always be running around trying to button my shirt up. I know that wasn't in her job, But, something else that happened while I was there, so there was a group of girls that beat on me, like, relentlessly. 2 times they put me in the hospital, and they got me from behind, so I didn't even see it coming, right? Like, 2 times put in the hospital, I'm like 12 years old. So, anywho, like, here we go. I joined a gang. Well, good. So some people know me, because everyone laughs, because if you saw me now, you'd be like, no, you were not in a gang. I was in a gang because I joined it for protection. And you know what? Those girls didn't bother me anymore. But I got a lot of more charges, let me just tell you that. But here is like, and you know what else is kind of strange? I've never brought that up when I went out to juvie. Like, I always pray and have God, like, kind of have me share, but I haven't shared that yet. I mean, if I do, I do, but so far I feel like it would have been a blocker. I don't know. I haven't shared it yet. I don't know. God's in charge. Alcoholics Anonymous. I love you guys. Okay, I love you guys. I'm so scared. This is not what I like to do. I'd rather just, be out there, talking one-on-one. But I remember I was just a couple years sober, and there was a lady, she was probably in her late 60s, and she was sharing that she was in a gang, and she had a tattoo to prove it. And don't you know, I chased her down after the meeting. I was like, I was in a gang. I was like, I have a tattoo to prove it. She was just like, but that's how we connect. I just love that. I I love it, I love it, I love it. So like I said, I was getting in a lot of trouble, like a lot of minor in possession, minor under the influence, lots of interference with the police officer tickets. One particular police officer, he was always arresting me. And I was the kind that always had warrants too. So even if I wasn't doing anything illegal, I had a warrant, so I was going to jail. Like, you know, you'd have that moment when the car was getting pulled over. It was like, I think about fight or flight. It's like you have that, it's like, you're like, okay. It's like you got to commit, right? You're like, okay, now, you know, and you're out of there. I always tease like spotlighting, you know, for Melissa out in the field. Just got to lay low. A lot. But yeah, the one police officer, every time he would pick me up, I'll be all mad and angry at him because I'd be like, why you keep bothering me, like you're stalking me, you know. But he's like, I could have killed a whole tree on enough paperwork that I'd done up on you. Like, but I remember one time I was with a buddy. We had been drinking all day long, and he like had some, you know, outside stuff on him, and we got pulled over. And I remember we had went to the convenience store, and I was underage, and you know, he was like, I'm gonna run, I'm gonna go, and so we got pulled over. He took off. And then I remember I had just chocolate donuts, you know, from the bag, and I remember I just started eating them because I was underage. I didn't want to, like, you know, with a breathalyzer, I'm like, great, I'm going to get, you know, I'm going to be going back to jail. So I was trying to get the smell of alcohol off my breath. But when I got arrested, because I did, it was like I had, like, chocolate everywhere, but like, you know, I mean, everywhere, fingers, mouth, like clothes, but I mean, you didn't know it was chocolate. But nobody messed with me. I had my own little area. So, you know, didn't do well in school. You know, I got kicked out of school. I went to the alternative school. You know, I didn't follow through there. You know, that total inability to follow through with things. Like, that's one of the things I get to do in recovery. Like, if I say I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. Oh, man, no loose ends, right? Like, that's a cool thing. And so I sat in jail until I turned 18. I had a long sentence. And I thought when I turned 18 that I was going to get switched over to the adult block. But then the guard just came down and he was like, well, you know, released from the custody of the state. And I was like, what? I was like, does this mean what I think this means? It was my birthday. And it did. And so I got out, and I like to say that I did better, but I didn't. I mean, I didn't. I did really bad. I just partied, and, you know, I got arrested a whole bunch more times. There's part, like, in Bill's story where he talks about, you know, there were periods of sobriety, gradually things got worse. There were never really periods of sobriety, like I was still doing a bunch of stuff, but I was still able to kind of show up. I had the idea that I didn't need to be out west, because, you know, I'm from North Carolina, but I got out west. I mean, I was in South Dakota for a little while. But Wyoming, and then I went back home, and then I got my GED, and I always tell the kids that too, like, you don't have to be a product of your circumstances, man. Like, there are people and resources that want to help, so don't, like, I mean, and when we get in recovery, like, the sky's the limit. It's so true. Like, if we make a list of things that we want in our lives, like, whoa, like, we would have I mean, I wouldn't even been able to, like, think of things. Like, it's not stuff, it's like the army of people I get to love today, you know? So that's so cool. Yeah, so I got my GED. I got accepted in a dental hygiene program. That's God doing for me what I couldn't do for myself. At a community college, you know, I got grants to go to school. And so I'm like, doing good, you know, but I mean, like I said, I'm still drinking and doing a whole bunch of other stuff, but I'm still able to, like, go to school. And even in, like, all that chaos, I still, like, I graduated from hygiene school, and they, like, nominated me, like they gave me, like, the Heart Award, and I feel like that's significant, because I was still sick then. I mean, I wasn't as sick as I got, but I was, like, you know, always had the heart. I just had the inability to follow through with things. And so when I graduated from hygiene school in '05, I moved up to Raleigh, North Carolina to hopefully be closer to my mom because she got real sick, dialysis, like her drinking, her kidneys shut down. And so just drop her off at dialysis, throw her a little pillow. But I didn't do well in Raleigh. It took 4 years to demolition derby my life. But I started working as a dental hygienist, and I was like really, really proud of that. But not proud in like an ego proud, but just like proud. Like I had actually done something and followed through with something. But then my drinking started to change, right? Like I'm like, oh, I gotta go to work, so I cannot be drinking. But I would be drinking, I'll be like, oh, I gotta stop at 2, then it'd be like 3, and then it'd be 4, and then the sun's coming up, and I'm all geeked out, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm either gonna no-show or call in. I gave away a lot of my jobs to drinking. I remember, I was temping for a while too, and I always kid, that's like the perfect job for an alcoholic. You just show up whenever and then they write you a check. Except for I got in a lot of financial trouble because like when they do that, it's like a 1099 or something, and you're supposed to take out money for taxes. So, I didn't do that. But I made my amends. It took me a lot of years to clean up my financial wreckage, but I was able to do it. It took me about 6.5 years, so that's a blessing. And so I remember I had gotten another job, and I was like, okay, I'm going to get it together. The doctor was nice. I am nervous energy, right? That's just who I am. I have to love myself for who I am. And he liked who I was. And I had never heard that before. He was like, you just be you. And I'm like, man, that's cool. I was like, don't mess this up, Melissa. But I did. I messed it up. I was drinking. I was practicing impaired. I remember one day the investigator showed up at the office because it was reported that I was practicing impaired. I had went to sleep actually that night before he showed up, and so I was like, no. I was a big liar too, like most of my life until I got sober. It's like spiritual principle number 1, honesty. But I was like, no. But my drinking started to progress. Like we talked about it, lost the power of choice. I started having seizures as a result of my drinking. I wasn't able to pay my bills. I eventually, lost that job. You would think like, oh, there's an investigator showing up at the office. Maybe I should quit drinking. But, within like a couple of weeks, I had lost that job. Lots of broken relationships. When I had my apartment, I was about to get evicted because I hadn't paid rent, and paranoia, woo-hoo. I was so paranoid at the end of my drinking. I'm so grateful to be free from the obsession to want to drink alcohol and the paranoia. I was so paranoid, y'all. Like, I was having violent seizures. Like, I had this peephole. I'm not afraid of the people today. Like, that's a blessing. Oh my gosh. Like, that's awful. Had like blankets over my windows, and I had to put something over my peephole, but it's kind of like a little God wink, right? Because I was so sick. I was dying. But on the peephole, I had this little thing. It said, courage does not always roar. Sometimes courage is the quiet voice at the end of the day saying, I will try again tomorrow. And that's where I was in my drinking. I didn't know how to stop, and I was so mad because it's like I knew better. Like in Bill's story, it talks about that ominous warning. But here I am, the last seizure that I had, it was a violent one. Like I had paralysis on the left part of my body for, I bet it was under a minute. But that was my moment of clarity. I remember I laid there on the ground, and that's what my dad looked like at the end, and after I was like, what am I doing? And I was super scared, and I had called an uncle, and he, and this is God doing for me what I couldn't do for myself, because I had not talked to this uncle in 5 years. So the fact that I even had his phone number, and I just called him, that's how selfish I am, and, being an alcoholic, I just call him, oh, here I am, I'm a big mess, but he came. I was living in Raleigh. He was in Jacksonville. He drove immediately to pick me up. He saw my condition, like Twitch. They call me Twitch in treatment. I was like restless. Like my legs were tapping. Like, you think I move around now? Oh my gosh. That's what my uncle keeps saying. Like that whole ride, he picked me up in Raleigh. He took me back to Jacksonville immediately to the hospital. And I don't remember any of that, but he just said, like, even if I would kind of pass out, I didn't rest. Like, my body just kept moving, and then of course they were like, well, she needs to go to treatment. And so then I went to Walter B. Jones, right, Greenville, North Carolina, because that was the one place that would take me. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I never had health insurance as an adult until I got into Alcoholics Anonymous. There was no money in the bank account. And so it was like a state-run place, so they will take you if you don't have anything. So I went to Walter B. Jones and I detoxed. I remember when you go in those places, if you tell them about the seizures, they're going to make you sleep on the floor. But it reminded me just like being in like county, it's like the little mat and, on the floor. The doctor would come in and be like, how do you feel today? I want you to remember how you feel. And then I think it was like a week. They let me out with like the general public, but I still had to sit on a corner because like I had muscle spasms. Oh, and I did lose my license to be able to practice dental hygiene. It was taken away. Not safe to take care of the public, but I hope I tie back into that. But in recovery, I'm licensed to practice in 3 states now. So that's just a blessing of Alcoholics Anonymous and God, and just staying on the path. And lots of drug tests. That I paid for as a juvie, like the state pays. As adults, you pay. Consequences of my actions, though, for sure. And so then after Walter B. Jones, it was suggested to me that I need more time. I don't know if you guys heard that in recovery, but I heard that a lot. Oh, she just needs more time. You're right. And so then I went from that treatment center to Hope Valley in Mayberry, North Carolina. But I was angry at the time. Well, I was just angry, right? Like, I'm almost free from a lot of the anger today, but I was super angry when I first came in. And I was mad because I was like, why do I got to go to this treatment center? I didn't relapse. Why do I got to go to another one? But here's where the miracle happened. When I got to Hope Valley, there were 2 women there. And one of the women, they gave me my first big book, right? And they said, in here is a set of spiritual principles that will solve all my problems. And I heard that. Like, that's the first thing I heard and I connected into. So I spent another month there. And then, we did like Father Martin Chalk Talks. And he talks about like the alcoholic or untreated alcoholism. It's like emotion over intellect. And, in time in recovery, it's like intellect over emotion, or like sanity, right? 10-step promise. Daily reprieve. That's in there too. And then after Hope Valley, I would say they were my angels. It was the first time, I don't know, I guess I connected in that there could be a solution. Maybe I didn't have to drink like I was. Because for me, and I want to make sure to say this, like the obsession of the mind, it was like relentless. Like, mine did not just go away. Mine went away actually about 9 months into recovery, and it was shortly after I worked my first 5th step. But it like hollered at me all the time. I couldn't even keep my covers on at night, like sleeping was really hard for me in early recovery. And then after, Hope Valley, it was suggested that I need more time. So then I was transferred a lot to Southern Pines, North Carolina. So I ended up staying at the Bethany House, a women's halfway house, and I ended up staying there a year. So it was a super strict halfway house, like no cell phones, no car privileges, not that I had like a license or insurance or anything, but you know, that never stopped me before. So, but they got me acclimated to Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, my very first home group was, my very first home group, I was going to say not the principals group, but Primary Purpose, thank you. But that was my very first home group for my very first year, and it was so funny because so many people in my recovery, my husband and I have had a couple of moves, like everyone's talking about Tom I. And so I was in his home group, right? And I was in his home group when, I didn't know Tom I was Tom I, but that's what's so cool about Alcoholics Anonymous. He's just a home group member. He showed up, he helped. I remember I was just 2 months sober. He put me right at that front door, and he was like, you're gonna sit here and you're gonna greet people. And I was so twitchy, y'all. I mean, I cannot even, it's funny because we've had moves, and when there's anniversaries, people will be like, oh, you guys should have seen this one when she first came in. I'm like, y'all didn't see me. They saw me. But every time Tom would come, to the door, he would just be he would do a little dance with me because I was obviously dancing. But they taught me about Primary Purpose, lots of service work there. Strict AA, I say. They taught me, I remember, so their format would be on Monday nights, if you were under 6 months sober, you would go to a newcomers meeting, and then they would also have a discussion and a big book. And so I remember when I finally got my 6 months, I was so excited because I was like, oh, go to the big book study now. I was really excited about that. And so, when I was there, I got to get to be friends with women. I didn't have any women friends, before I got sober. They taught me, I did chores again, so it's a hard knock life for us. Here I was again. But again, I just realized the severity of the disease because so many girls were coming and going. I teased that they taught me to dress like a lady, shorts longer than my underwear. Because I didn't know how to dress when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous. But the women in here taught me how to dress. And so, after I was there about a year, I went to live with an aunt and uncle. And so the uncle that picked me up that day. And this was an opportunity for me because I was in so much financial wreckage, lots. I just went to that ATM all the time till there was no more money, and then I borrowed money, always say you can spot an alcoholic, just watch the ATM machine. Oh, man. But, and so when I moved in with my aunt and uncle, it was an opportunity for me, but again, I had to sign, a consent order, to live with them, just so he was protecting his family, and, I was getting drug tested, and, but the cool thing, when I was there, it was real strict. It was just about my recovery and about working. So, I did get my license, after a couple years in sobriety back, to be able to practice dental hygiene. I worked at Cracker Barrel for a long time, and so I was just working, I would work Cracker Barrel on the weekends, and I would work, in dental, during the week, and I would it was about my recovery and about paying off my debt, and that's it. Where's Dayshu? But the 15 minutes, I didn't have the ankle bracelet, but I literally had 15 minutes, 15 minutes before and after. It wasn't about my social life. I wasn't allowed to date. There were no boys allowed at the Bethany house. There were no boys allowed, and that's a new idea for me, But my sponsor would always tell me, just wait, wait until you get to a place where, a man will complement your life. I had a long period of reconstruction, and then I got to work on the best relationship, with the one with my Creator. So that dependence, right? Dependence on my higher power instead of, the booze or the boys. And so, but while I was in the house, God was showing me what a healthy marriage looked like, right? Like old ideas, like I was never gonna get married, no way. I mean, I got engaged a couple of times, but like, never followed through. I havoc. But I had to let go of those old ideas. But while I was staying with my aunt and uncle, like I got to just witness by their example, like what a loving marriage was. And so I remember when I got my first apartment, I was a couple years sober, and like my husband's sponsee like led a meeting the other day, and he ended and he was like, when did you feel like the miracle was happening for you? And I like thought about that, and it wasn't like a special day, but remember I had my apartment, and I'd worked all day. After work I met with a girl, we read the big book, we went to a meeting, and at the end of the day, like I was talking to God, like turning the lights off, and I was like, thank you, like just little stuff like that. But like, okay, so I did get my license to be able to practice dental hygiene back, which is such a blessing. I get an opportunity. They have like a monitoring program, so literally I was getting drug tested like at least once a week. Every morning I would have to call in this number for like, 7.5 years, and then put in my social security number, and then it would be like, you are selected, or you are not selected. When I met the man that kind of runs the toxology place, I said, I think about you before I think about my higher power in the morning. It's like, okay, because I had to call right away, but consequences of my actions, like sometimes I would get haircuts, I call them haircuts, but I was like a couple years sober before I could get my hair done professionally in recovery. And I remember the lady that was doing my hair, I didn't say anything, but like I had to go to the urgent care to get the hair follicle testing, and so like there would be like big chunks back there, and so like some would be growing out and they always pick another spot, and so I knew when she was like doing my hair, she was kind of looking, but she didn't say anything, and I didn't say anything, it was just like, But yeah, so, but like being able to practice dental hygiene, I had a consent order Googled. I wanted to say that too, like, blessings of recovery. Like if you had Googled my name in 2009 and then like Google it now, like that's recovery too. Like that'll just shine a light of recovery, because it looked a lot different in 2009 than it does now. And then too, one of those memes, like I like or meditation, because sometimes Google doesn't have all the answers. I like that meme too a lot. But so I got an opportunity to practice dental hygiene in North Carolina, and then with our monitoring program, I also get an opportunity to be a peer support volunteer, which is really cool. It's kind of like what we're doing in here, but just like, a little different. A is my connect, my lifeline, but I get to be a peer support for other dentists and hygienists who have lost their license, so I can kind of share my experience of, hey, I was there too, and, in time, if you, do this, you could possibly have it back to bring some hope. And so that's cool. I'm still really involved in getting to do that. Little God winks, I remember my husband and I, so when, we had got married, that's another blessing of recovery. Like I said, old ideas, like I was never going to get married. And then, I met him, so I was not going to date an Alcoholics Anonymous. I had my mind made up. Only because, after I moved away from Southern Pines, I moved to Jacksonville, North Carolina, a Marine Corps base, young population, and everyone, there was a lot of havoc being I was sponsoring women, and you can just make suggestions, but then all of a sudden they couldn't go to certain meetings. I'm like, I'm not going to mess up the only safe place that I have to go in the world. I wasn't willing to do it. But John, my husband, we were friends, for years. And who knew? That works. Being friends first. I remember when we got engaged, his dad had said, did you have that moment, when you fell in love with him? And the cool thing about Alcoholics Anonymous is that I'm sober, and I have moments that are clear and that I can remember them, and I do remember that moment. I remember we weren't even dating, but I worked all the time, right, to pay off all that debt. And I was at Cracker Barrel, and we had the same home group. It was Sunday night, and I remember it started snowing. It doesn't snow a lot in Jacksonville, North Carolina, and so I was taking a drink order, and I looked up, and there was John, and he was just making sure that I could get home okay, and just little acts. I don't know, I didn't ever feel that kind of love before we get sober. But there's so much love in Alcoholics Anonymous. It's so cool. When we got married and then we moved up to West Virginia, And that's like when I get to meet all these wonderful people that I love so much. Like I always say, like I wasn't super excited about it at first because I love to be by the ocean, but I always say I met the most wonderful people in the whole world there. Oh man, it's so cool. I'm crying, but like it's joy. But yeah, so when I moved to Virginia, my trouble follows me, right? So like I want to practice dental hygiene in West Virginia, but I got that consent order and it's not really pretty. But anywho, so like I had to go to Charleston, West Virginia for my hearing, and I'm scared, and I'm praying, because that's what we're taught to do in Alcoholics Anonymous, thy will be done, show up, legs on prayers, and we go out there, and I'm so scared, and there's a blizzard, like a blizzard. And then it's funny how your prayers change. I'm like, well, we already drove all the way across West Virginia. Like, I hope they have the hearing. But what was so cool is that I was like so scared for that hearing. But like all the board members had got snowed in and they weren't prepared. So like when they came in, they had the same clothes that they had on from yesterday. They were like unshaven, so like God removed that intimidation factor, And then they did. They were really kind to me. They asked if I would help on their board for their recovery program. Like I said, how cool is that? And I did want to talk about my sister one more time, as I feel like that's like a big God thing. So the day that my sister overdosed, I got asked to speak at a men's treatment center in Rockingham, North Carolina. The girl that I was roommates with in the halfway house in Bethany House all those years ago, she ended up having a daughter and I'm her fairy godmother, which is so cool. But when we had first got sober, her brother had hung himself. And then, but then I was speaking at the Colony in Rockingham, North Carolina Men's Treatment Center, and I was with her, and her dad runs it. Like, he's devoted his life to Alcoholics Anonymous. His initials are HP, and I always tease, if I was a guy, he would be my sponsor. I was like, that'd be so cool. HP's my sponsor. But, so, I'm out there, talking to the guys at the treatment center, and that's the same day my sister overdosed. And I remember being able to graduate from the Bethany House when I stayed there. I can always come back, right? As long as I'm sober, I have a place to stay there. If I need to wash laundry or if I'm hungry, like I can always go. And so me and Christy, that was my roommate, we were staying the night there together with the girls, and that's when I found out about my sister. And most nights I would be with my husband, but I was with her, and like all those years ago, like that's what was happening to her, so God just had us like be together. And then in the morning, like there were a lot of like moms out there, that were staying in the house. I didn't know them, they were new girls, but it was like maybe God was using that to let them women know to stay. Like, if you're here right now, stay. Like, don't go. I mean, we know it works. And like I said, I get to show up. I've been crying so much. I'm so sorry. I am usually filled with joy. I have a big God in my life, in my heart, and recently, like in my mind, like this is a new idea for me, right? Loving thoughts instead of fearful thoughts. One story I wanted to share, like in step 12, like there's 3 parts, but, carrying this message, which is like the greatest honor that we get to do in Alcoholics Anonymous. It's a story of the lamplighter, like when he's in the town and he's going around and he's lighting the lights and you can't see where he is, but you can see where he's been. I feel like that's what we get to do in Alcoholics Anonymous. And then another story that I love is that, all right, there were these 2 men, and they were going to talk to the elder. They wanted to ask the elder what they could do in this life to please God. And so the elder had told the first man, well, live your life with love. He said, okay. And then the second man came in there, and he said, what can I do in this life to please God? And he said, live your life with joy. And then so the two men were walking back to town, and they figured out they had different answers. And so the second man was like, well, he went back and he talked to the elder, and he said, well, why did you tell me something different? And he said, oh, my son, for it means the same thing, right? Happy, joyous, and free, and the joy is the journey. Thank you for letting me share my story with y'all today. We're storytellers here in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm looking forward to hearing y'all's story.